Everyday Use by Alice Walker, Part 3. After dinner, Dee Wangerow went to the trunk at the foot of my bed and started rifling through it. Maggie hung back in the kitchen over the dishpan. Out came Wangerow with 2 quilts. They had been pieced by Grandma Dee, and then Big D, me had hung them on the quilt frames of the front porch and quilted them. One was in the Lone Star pattern. The other was Walk Around the Mountain. In both of them were scraps of dresses Grandma Dee had worn 50 and more years ago. Bits and pieces of Grandpa Gerald's paisley shirts, and one teeny faded blue piece about the size of a penny matchbox that was from Great-Grandpa Ezra's uniform that he wore in the Civil War. "Mama," Wangerow said, sweet as a bird, "can I have these old quilts?" I heard something fall in the kitchen, and a minute later the kitchen door slammed. "Why don't you take 1 or 2 of the others?" I asked. "These old things was just done by me and Big D from some tops your grandma pieced before she died." "No," said Wangerow, "I don't want those. They're stitched around the borders by machine." "That will make them last better," I said. "That's not the point," said Wangerow. "These are all pieces of dresses Grandma used to wear. She did all this stitching by hand. Imagine!" She held the quilts securely in her arms, stroking them. "Some of the pieces, like those lavender ones, come from old clothes her mother handed down to her," I said, moving up to touch the quilts. Dee Wangerow moved back just enough so that I couldn't reach the quilts. They already belonged to her. "Imagine," she breathed again, clutching them closely to her bosom. "The truth is," I said, "I promised to give them quilts to Maggie for when she marries John Thomas." She gasped like a bee had stung her. "Maggie can't appreciate these quilts," she said. "She'd probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use." "I reckon she would," I said. "God knows I've been saving them for long enough with nobody using them. I hope she will." I didn't want to bring up how I had offered Dee Wangerow a quilt when she went away to college. Then she had told me they were old-fashioned, out of style. "But they're priceless," she was saying now furiously, for she has a temper. "Maggie would put them on the bed, and in 5 years they'd be in rags. Less than that." "She can always make some more," I said. "Maggie knows how to quilt." Dee Wangerow looked at me with hatred. "You just will not understand. The point is these quilts. "Well," I said, stumped, "what would you do with them?" "Hang them," she said, as if that was the only thing you could do with quilts. Maggie by now was standing in the door. I could almost hear the sound her feet made as they scraped over each other. "She can have them, Mama," she said, like somebody used to never winning anything or having anything reserved for her. I can remember Grandma Dee without the quilts." I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with checkerberry snuff, and it gave her face a kind of dopey, hangdog look. It was Grandma Dee and Big D who taught her how to quilt herself. She stood there with her scarred hands hidden in the folds of her skirt. She looked at her sister with something like fear, but she wasn't mad at her. This was Maggie's portion. This was the way she knew God to work. When I looked at her like that, something hit me in the top of my head and ran down to the soles of my feet, just like when I'm in church and the Spirit of God touches me and I get happy and shout. I did something I never had done before, hugged Mary to me, then dragged her on into the room, snatched the quilts out of Miss Wangerow's hands, and dumped them into Maggie's lap. Maggie just sat there on my bed with her mouth open. "Take 1 or 2 of the others," I said to Dee. But she turned without a word and went out to Hakim a barber. "You just don't understand," she said as Maggie and I came out to the car. "Why don't I understand?" I wanted to know. "Your heritage," she said. And then she turned to Maggie, kissed her, and said, "You ought to try to make something of yourself too, Maggie. It's really a new day for us. From the way you and Mama still live, you'd never know it." She put on some some sunglasses that hid everything above the tip of her nose and her chin. Maggie smiled, maybe at the sunglasses, but a real smile, not scared. After we watched the car dust settle, I asked Maggie to bring me a dip of snuff. And then the two of us sat there just enjoying until it was time to go in the house and go to bed. 1973.